When people start to show up, we can kind of rewind it a little bit. All right. So I prepared actually a lot of material for the presentation, but it's not very well organized.
No problem. You
So,
didn't even have to say that. I wouldn't have known anything.
so the word personality is interesting because it originates from the word mask, as in Greek plays.
Oh,
So in the play, they have these actors. So in order to identify, which role they're playing, they wear different masks. And persona, the word persona, comes from the Greek word for mask. So personality is actually derived from a mask that we present to the outside world. So it's not quite what we think it is. Okay. Um, so in a way, this is kind of my summary. We are taking on, a character, in life, and our so-called personality is the quote-unquote mask that we wear without even knowing it. When we, do stuff on stage. So with today's, workshop, we are basically looking at personality from the perspective of organizational effectiveness, because when certain types of personalities mix and they don't know how to interact with each other, then an organization can be very ineffective because you end up with people, basically fighting each other for no particular reasons.
true.
And some people experience that more than others too. So this particular section talks about how we categorize personalities. There are many ways. MBTI, or Myers-Briggs Type Indicator (MBTI), is used a lot. Okay, so this is one of the most commercially used personality categorization. There are some free tests. 16personalities.com is actually a pretty cool website, I think. Some people don't like it, thinking that it is not scientific, but I find it to be fairly accurate in my case. So it's really just 16personalities.com. So you can take the test. It will take about, I would say, 10, 15 minutes to take the test. You don't need registration, and if you think you don't want to let them know of your personal email address, you can always just make one up, like a Google, email, because they do send you a personalized analysis at the end of the test if you give them a email address. And I find it, to be fairly accurate. And this one is a little bit different too because it gives you percentages. So instead of just giving you saying that you're introverted or extroverted, they say that you are 60% extroverted and 40% introverted. So that means some people can be really kind of 50-50, an even split, and so the letter is not all one or the other way, like the other tests.
It's more realistic, right?
I think this is a lot more realistic. So when you take this test, at the end it will give you a split, and also on top of that, instead of just giving you the 4 letters, it will also give you a 5th letter, which is either T or A. T is turbulent, and then A is assertive. So that has to do with whether a particular person has a tendency to think or react negatively or not. So this is it. They have done something differently with this particular website, and the best part is it's free. You can pay a lot of money, an organization can pay a lot of money for MBTI tests, and this one is free. So if you have not done it before, I recommend that you do it, either during the presentation or after. You can do it on a cell phone too. This website is very cell phone friendly, so you can actually take the test easily on a cell phone too. So the next part talks about how do you interpret those letters. So do you have any experience with the MBTI letters?
I I I uh I think I took this before, but I'm not sure.
Okay. So I can just
Oh, it
explain
says
it
it
to you.
takes less than 12 minutes. Do you mind if I do it while you're talking?
Or I can stop talking.
Oh,
Some of those questions, are kind of tricky, so you might want to just take some time. We can wait for people to come to.
okay.
Yep, so go ahead.
When you say that they're tricky,
Mm-hmm.
the way that you read it, you don't know how to. Like this one says, you do not usually initiate conversations. I guess it's the do not that throws me off. I know
Mhm.
I do that, so I put disagree, right?
Correct.
Okay.
When I mention tricky, I refer to they don't tell you in what situation,
Oh, okay.
because for certain people in certain situations they feel like they want to do things in this way, but in a different situation they want to do it in a different way, but it doesn't describe the situation. Hi there. Come on in. No problem. Yeah, we are just taking a test right now. So if you want to, you can start with the test.
Okay.
You can also take the test on your cell phone. It works really well on the cell phone as well. So you can do it in either way. takes a while to sign in.
Is it because of the location of things? Or?
No, I think it has to do with how the profiles are set up.
Oh,
Yeah, so they need to use the network to transport the profile over.
uh-huh.
So I'm Tack, and
I'm
you,
Ann.
you're Ann?
From fashion.
Fashion, oh, okay.
And you're from?
I'm actually from right here, from CIS,
Oh, okay.
from Computer Information Science.
Uh-huh.
So I'm not from not from psychology.
Your temporary home.
Yeah, we're.
Do you guys have a planned move date? Whenever-
I think the move in is supposed to be 2020, like next year,
Uh-huh.
maybe the second half, maybe fall semester.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
'Cause-
Hopefully we'll be here before you know it. Okay.
Can you find the browser?
Does it matter which browser?
It doesn't really matter. Chrome works really well. Yeah, it takes a little bit of time for these computers to get to the point where you can use them. So Rachel, got yours?
Yeah. I'm on log, logistician? Am I
Log,
saying
logistician. And ISTJ?
it? Yeah.
Okay. You can click on the. You can see how whether they describe you well or not. Ooh, it's really raining now. So Rachel, what do you think? Is it accurate or is it only as accurate as astrology?
No, it's accurate. What? Let's see. What made me smile? Um, dependency on others is often a weakness. That's true.
I think ISTJs are known to be dependable, reliable.
Yeah.
You're supposed to have a really good memory too.
Okay.
You can focus on details as well.
There we go. They say they're gonna get something done, meet their obligations no matter the personal cost, and are baffled by people when they don't hold their own word to the same respect. So,
That
that's totally me.
that's totally you. Okay.
Totally me.
But you also have to look at things that descriptions that do not fit you. That's how you can kind of test whether this test is accurate or not, at least for you. So do you identify with well-known people who are ISTJs?
I'm looking at them now. Denzel Washington.
George Washington.
Denzel Washington also.
Yep. Then
Natalie Portman, Anthony Hopkins, George Washington.
Condoleezza Rice, George H. Bush. So, Anne, are you done with your test?
Done with my test, yeah.
All right, cool. Do you mind sharing your results?
I am
A defender, so that would be ISFJ
ISFJ.
Okay.
T.
dash T with a turbulent variant. Okay, cool. Okay.
Do I start reading?
It's up to you. I mean, the idea of the workshop is to find out, what your type is and how it interacts with other types in an organization. So in my case, how do I interact with my colleagues? And for the most part, how do I interact with my students? Because I also spend a lot of time with my students. In Rachel's case, a lot of time you spend with the students too, right? You have students in the lab, and also other people who work in the lab. And are you faculty? Yeah. So you also spend a lot of time with your students, more so than with your colleagues. So that means so how our personality types can kind of impact how we teach, and how students perceive us, in the end. So interestingly, we are all introverted. we got 3 people in this workshop, and we're all introverted. So introverted is interesting. It doesn't mean that you cannot talk to people. Okay, a lot of times people think, oh, you're an introvert, so you're a hermit, right? You don't talk to people, you hide from the public. No, that's not the case. There are a lot of introverted people who are even comedians, even on Saturday Night Live. One figure is oh man, what's her name? She did a lot of impersonation of Sarah Palin.
Oh,
What's her name? She's on the list. I can probably look it up. She's on the list of INTPs. That's the other part that is kind of interesting is people do not expect thinking people to be funny. But she is actually an INTP. I'm just trying to look for her name. Let's see. Nope, they don't have it here. She did a lot of impersonation of Sarah Palin. What's her name? Gosh. Sarah Palin. There we go. What? Tina Fey, that's it. So most people do not think of Tina Fey as an introvert. She's on the screen, she's funny, when she's, she connects with the audience, but she's actually an introvert. So now the question is, what makes an introvert an introvert? It really has to do with how you recharge. Like, when you're really tired, you're exhausted, or you're stressed out, what do? Do you go to a bar and then start talking to random people to relax and get your energy back? Or do you just kind of go back to your room, shut the door, turn on some music and just kind of like, okay, I'm by myself, I'm in my own space, now I can recharge. If it's the latter, you're introvert. If it is the former, then you're an extrovert. Now, some extroverts do not need to talk to people, they just need to go out and do stuff. Okay, those are extroverts as well. So it doesn't only refer to people, but also the environment. So if people recharge by going out, to recharge, they're extroverts. Okay. The second letter, which is interesting because both of you are sensing type, and I'm an intuitive type. But these words have very specific meaning. It doesn't mean that if you're a sensing type, you don't have intuition. It is not the conventional sense of intuition. So intuition in this case, basically it has to do with how you perceive the world, the N versus the S. If you are an S type, then you perceive the world using your 5 senses. Memory is important to you. Being able to touch things, tactile stuff is important to you. Hearing stuff is important to you. And it also has to do with how you maintain an internal representation of the world. If you're a sensing type, then it's all about facts, details, memory, experiences. So you can recall things, to a lot of details. If you're an N type, then I tend to lose details, and I only remember the patterns of things. I can compare two things and kind of figure out what is similar and what is different between the two things. But then, 5 minutes later, and you ask me details about one thing, I cannot tell you what it is. I can tell you, no, those two things have different colors. What is the color of the first one? Don't remember. The shapes are also different. What is the shape then? What is the shape of the second item? Can't remember. So that's kind of, it has to do with how your input function operates, or which way it prefers. The third one is thinking versus feeling, and there's a lot of misunderstanding about this as well. It's not like feeling people do not think, or thinking people do not feel. This has to do with how a person, what is the priority of someone when they make decisions. Okay, it's about prioritization. It's not about the ability. It is more about, well, when you make a decision, what is the objective of your decisions? Feeling type people tend to make decisions to accomplish objectives that are based on values, morality, ethics. Those two are different. Morality is more internal, and ethics is external. So one is to meet the internal expectation, one is to meet the external expectation. Feelings and emotions. Thinking people tend to make decisions based on logic, whether something is correct or not, whether something is true or not, and to a very large extent, to certain people, also about efficiency. I'll give you, okay, and then the last one is judging versus perceiving. I'm perceiving, and you guys are what we call judging. And these words are kind of misleading. Judging does not mean judgmental. They're completely different things, okay? Judging means, structure, okay? Do you prefer things that are structured? Like you lay out what you need to do in a day ahead of time, and you just follow the plan. Or do you just go like, what do I feel like doing right now? And you just go do that. Sometimes, the best description of judging versus perceiving that I have heard myself from people saying, talking about that, is judging has a strong sense of how things ought to be. Okay, and perceiving is kind of the opposite. Things are kind of open most of the time. Until I really need to, I don't make a decision. I don't evaluate. I don't say it's good, bad, correct or not. I just go like, it is what it is. Okay, but until such time that I really have to make a decision, option A or option B, then I would try to make a decision. But I don't naturally, put things into bins. So is that okay so far? Mm-hmm. Is that kind of helping to describe your personality? Is it consistent with how you see yourself? Okay, all right. All right, so MBTI is actually based on the work of Carl Jung. I'm pretty sure I do not pronounce Jung correctly, because is it Norwegian or is it Swede? Oh. It's not English. The last name is, so Carl Jung was the psychologist who first came out with a theory of what we call function stacks. So within the function stack, we got functions. each function has got 2 letters. The first letter can be one of these 4. And you might say, oh, but we have seen these letters before. We have. They're exactly the same thing. S stands for sensing, N stands for intuition, T stands for thinking, and then F stands for feeling. Exactly the same thing. But then each function also has a second letter. The second letter can either be an E, which is extroverted, or I, which is introverted. But we have seen those words before. Yes, they mean exactly the same thing. So now when you pair up these things, you have 8 possible combinations. So the 8 possible combinations, okay, I don't have it here, but I'll use a little notepad to help me here. Okay, so when you combine these two, you have 8 possible functions. Like if you're a feeling type, you can be Fi, which is introverted feeling, or you can have Fe, which is extroverted feeling. Thinking is the same way. Ti is introverted thinking, Te is extroverted thinking. Sensing, same thing, introverted, extroverted. Intuition, introverted, and extroverted. So, but what do these things mean? We'll get to that later. Okay. So now the question is, what do we do with these things? Well, as it turns out, in Carl Jung's theory, you have a stack of 4 functions that you're conscious about, that you're aware of. Okay. So, and they're arranged in a particular order, starting with dominant, or abbreviated as DOM. Secondary is auxiliary. The third one is tertiary, or just TER, ter. And then the inferior is INF. And they are ordered in this particular thing. And then the energy orientation has to alternate, so it has to be IE or EIEI. And then the dominant and the inferior function must belong to the same type, so they can either both be perceiving, which means they're S or N, or they're both judging, which means they're T and F. So I know this is all very confusing. But before we get to the actual breakdown of the function stack, we'll just kind of go over, what does it mean to be a dominant function? What is an auxiliary function? How does it relate to the other functions and so on? So we'll take a look at these. So if you think about a car, with 4 people in it, the dominant function is the driver. So the driver is in direct control of the vehicle, which is your mind, okay? And that's the go-to person. If the dominant function is not working correctly, then your car is not going to go in the right direction. Auxiliary is kind of like a co-pilot or a navigator, the person who is sitting right next to the driver. Because the driver has to kind of focus on the road, okay, on the immediate things that has to happen right away. So the co-pilot or the navigator is going to do like, okay, I need to change the temperature. Can you kind of make the car a little bit warmer? So instead of having the driver to kind of do all the things at the same time, the co-pilot or the navigator can help with that. Okay, because the navigator doesn't have to drive the car. The navigator can also be helpful in terms of figuring out, where is the next exit? How much time do we have until the next gas station, and so on and so forth. Okay. Tertiary is kind of below auxiliary. This is the 10-year-old in the back seat. The 10-year-old is not going to cause a fuss most of the time. Just most of the time, he or she is just going to be there. Okay. But when the car stops, the tertiary function can bring entertainment and enjoyment. I'll give you one example. My tertiary function is SI, which is related to experience, memory, and stuff like that. So I'm kind of nostalgic about things. So my memory serves a function that is kind of cool. It's like, oh, okay, I remember when I was a kid, I used to listen to this song. And listening to that song again brings me joy, brings me happiness. Because, that's kind of like something that I remember from my past. But I don't operate on a daily basis based on experience or memory. Every day is a new day. I make decisions on the spot, not based on how things used to be, how you know you know what happened in the past does not influence what I do things today. But occasionally, when I listen to a song, from the '80s, okay, I go like, oh, I remember that song. That's kind of nice. And then there's the inferior function, the fourth one on the function stack. That's a 3-year-old in the back seat. The 3-year-old, being the most immature and the least aware to the consciousness, is the one that can get a little bit jumpy. That's the one, that would be the function that needs to go to the bathroom all the time when you're on the car. It's like, I need to go to the bathroom. But we just went half an hour ago. I need to go now. Okay. The inferior function is interesting because that is when, this is how people get negative emotion most of the time. Okay. So in my case, my inferior function is extroverted feeling, which basically has to do with harmony in a group, within people. So when people do not get along with each other, they start to argue, or when I see someone who is not comfortable, someone who's crying, someone who's hurt, that really makes me anxious. Because one, I can tell that person is not comfortable, is hurt, needs help. But at the same time, because my extroverted feeling is my very immature and least aware function, I don't know what to do. So that gives me a sense of helplessness. And that easily kind of spiral into anger. Sometimes it spirals into I'm trying to find a word for what helplessness can lead into. It's right at the tip of my tongue, but I lost it. But anyway, people who are both of you have NE as your introverted, as your inferior function. So NE is extroverted intuition, which basically is about exploration of possible ideas and stuff like that. Okay, so sometimes the unknown, may be overwhelming to people with NE as an inferior function. If you don't know what's going to happen, then your mind will naturally think of how things can go wrong. Because you're used to having everything pre-planned, everything, I know exactly what's going to happen. Here's the line, ... But when you get to the point where there's no next dot anymore, it is all open-ended, then, someone with an inferior NE, extroverted intuition, will think of possibilities, but only the negative ones. How things can go wrong. And that brings anxiety. Is that kind of describing?
Yeah. It's something I try to not, it's taken work to not upset myself doing that.
Yeah.
So you have to kind of talk yourself, you need to go with the flow, deal with things as they come, and yeah, that's.
And this describes you too? Yeah. As opposed to me, because my NE is kind of like my second function, so it's higher up on the stack. So when I have something that I don't know how it's going to happen, I go like, well, we'll get there when we get there. And I don't worry about it. It's like, sometimes I even look at it with a curiosity. It's like, it'll be kind of interesting to find out how this is going to turn out. So I'm open to all possibilities, not just the positive and not just the negative. I know things can go wrong, but it can also go right. I just don't know what it is. But I'm curious. I want to find out which way it's going to turn out. So here's your function stack. Since I already know, where you guys are. So ISTJ is stacked like this. So introverted sensing is the first one, is the dominant function. Extroverted thinking is the second one. Introverted feeling is the third one. And then introverted Extroverted intuition is the last one. So are you guys starting to get used to the letters? A little bit? Okay. So the I and the E refer to introverted versus extroverted. And then the sensing is S, thinking is T, feeling is F, and then intuition is N. And then ISFJ is over here. You can see how ISTJ and ISFJ are similar. So the leading function are both sensing, introverted sensing, based on experience, based on the five senses, based on memory. Okay. The second function are different. One is TE and the other one is FE. Extroverted thinking is about efficiency. It's about how do I affect the outer world so that things are right, quote unquote. Extroverted feeling has to do with harmony. It's the emotion, feelings of mostly other people, not so much from within. It is you're in a room and you can easily tell whether people are cooperating or not, they're fighting or not. Is there synergy within the group, or is the group like totally not working? So that's FE. Introverted feeling, which is the opposite in terms of energy compared to extroverted feeling, is about your own sense of values. Basically, what do I consider as morally wrong and morally right? And it is independent to what other people think. It is from within. Introverted thinking is about your own internal logic. So you basically form an internal model, logical model of the exterior world, and you use that to figure out how things will happen. That's your logical framework, but it's based on internal framework. And then NE is common to both as well. So that's extroverted intuition, which has to do with the exploration of possibilities and ideas. Is that okay so far? So in my case, I'm an INTP, which is right here. So that's my function stack. My leading function is TI, which is introverted thinking. So that being my dominant function, so whenever I do something, whenever my mind works, the first thing it says is, does it make sense? So it compares what is happening to, or what I perceive, to my internal logical framework and say, is it consistent with my internal logical framework? Did I see this coming? Does it make sense to me? Okay. If it does not make sense, then my next function, which is NE, will explore ideas. It's like, well, why is it not matching what I expected? And it will explore possible ways to explain it so that I can change my internal framework. I told you guys about the third function already, introverted sensing. So I have a relatively weaker function of remembering things from the past. Okay, so I can't really rely on that, to do stuff. But it's kind of cool in a way because I can remember songs and cartoons that I used to watch when I was a kid. So it brings back joy and stuff like that. But for the most part, it doesn't, like right now when I'm teaching or when I'm presenting, that part does not really, it's not very high up in my function. It doesn't help me that much. And then extroverted feeling is my last function. So that's the part that can give me anxiety because, I can sense that some people are not working out, they're in pain or there's no harmony, but I can't do much about it because it's my least developed function. Okay. So not really sure whether I should go all the way to this part. So I'm going to skip a little bit here because we don't have enough time. There are several tests that you can also do. One is called Big Five. This one is kind of interesting because this one can be done by writings. Do you guys write a lot? A fair amount? It doesn't matter. I mean, like personal journals and stuff like that. Okay. So I'm not going to mention that. There is an AI, artificial intelligence program that can analyze your personality based on what you write. But that one is based on Ocean. Ocean has 5, things. Openness, which is kind of like, the P of MBTI. Are you open to new possibilities, changes and new ideas and stuff like that. Conscientiousness has to do with, that basically it's what the word means. Okay, if you're told to do something, are you going to do it? If you promise to do something, are you going to do it? Okay. Extroversion, okay, same thing as the I versus the E in MBTI. Agreeableness is kind of the FE, so in Young's function. So people with a high FE function in the function stack tend to be more agreeable. There's also neuroticism. Okay, neuroticism has no direct mapping in MBTI. It has to do with whether a person has a natural tendency to look at things kind of negatively. Okay, and there's also 4 tendency, but these are lesser used personality categories. So I'm going to skip some of this stuff here to talk about. Okay, so there's this stuff here. Most people refer to MBTI as not scientific because it was invented by a mother-daughter pair who were not psychologists. They were not trained or educated as psychologists, but they came up with the idea of, we can do some tests, and then we can figure out the personality of people, and then we can try to figure out how they can interact. Okay. So it was not considered scientific by most psychologists. So if it is not scientific, is it useful? Well, to some people, yes, and to some people, no. I think it has to do with how people answer the questions. Some people answer the questions after like a lot of thinking, so they overthink, and sometimes people answer the questions based on what they want to be instead of who they are. So with those people, it's not going to match. They will figure out that, hey, my personality, the letters do not reflect my actual personality.
Or maybe the situation that they're in, like some of those questions, I'm a new hire, so I'm acting differently on campus here than I did for 16 years on a different campus.
Right.
So,
it does not.
Temporarily, my actions seem different to me. Seem different, maybe they're not, but they seem different based on my situation that I'm in.
Correct. That's what I said to Rachel before you arrived, was the questions are tricky because it doesn't give you the actual situation where you have to make that decision. So, okay, would you do something in a group setting, in a debate? Would you rather preserve harmony, or would you rather make sure that the truth comes out? At the sacrifice of harmony. Well, are you talking about at work? Are you talking about in a class, or are you talking about in my family?
Is that the overanalyzing part?
Yeah, but if they don't specify in which condition, then some people say, well, at home harmony is more important. I can always fix the truth later. In a class, truth comes first because I'm the teacher. I cannot tell students something that is not true. With my colleagues, it's kind of like 50-50, depends on how much harmony I have to sacrifice to, speak the truth. If it is too much, I might hold my tongue. If it's not, I would just go ahead and, say, well, you guys are kind of not correct here. So, it doesn't specify in what situation. So that kind of makes it difficult to answer some of the questions. So now we are finally getting to section 6, organizational effectiveness and personalities. So I'm going to skip some of this stuff here, and we'll talk about, why there are interpersonality conflicts or friction. So why certain types do not mix, okay? And it's based on a few mechanisms. Not everybody is like you is a very important thing for everybody to remember. Until I took MBTI, the personality test, I thought everybody was like me. the truth is, in population, a very small portion of people are like me. So the way I think, the way I do things, the way I interact with other people is actually not the norm. And I didn't know it. And I thought, yeah, everybody should come to the same conclusion that we should do da 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 da. And when people do not go like, that doesn't make sense. Why would you not do that? Because I didn't understand that people are different. But since childhood, I kind of have that gnawing feeling that there's something wrong / different about myself, but I just couldn't explain it until I took the test. Okay? And then here's my wife, coming back from work and say, at work, I can find a ton of people who think and do things exactly like me. How come you are not like that? Well, as it turns out, she's an ISFJ like you, and ISFJ turns out to be the majority of females. So there are more ISFJs than any other type. Not combined, but as for each type, there are more ISFJs than other types. So her chances of finding somebody with the same personality is much higher. So she would naturally think that, yeah, everybody should think like me, but that's not the case. So that's kind of important. And not keeping this in mind can lead to a lot of problems. So I'll give you some examples. An extroverted and agreeable person may think, I only stay quiet when I am upset and I don't want to cause any discord within the group. That's kind of the natural thing to do because I'm naturally extroverted. I like to talk to people. I like to express how I feel. Okay? But when I'm quiet, it kind of means that I don't want to say anything mean. Okay? I really don't have anything to say. I'm holding my tongue. But to an introverted thinking person like me, that's my default. I don't say things. And that's natural for me. So an extroverted feeling person can look at me and go like, Tack is upset about something when I'm not really upset about anything. Do you see what I mean? So that assumption can lead to misinterpretations of other people. The next paragraph is not that important because, what am I thinking? Why am I not expressing? Well, because my mind is filled with, to most people, stupid things to think about. Okay? So I might be thinking, how many joules of energy can I save if I lower the temperature of this room by 1 degree Celsius? And I'm just thinking, and I'm not talking, I'm not having eye contact with people. And then people think that he must be upset about something. No, I'm not upset about something. I'm just thinking about something that most other people do not think is important. The second mechanism that can lead to the lack of this mechanism can lead to a lot of conflicts as well is to assume other people are mind readers. You really should know that I'm upset about something. That thing that you just said, that hurt me. And you should know about it. How would I know about it if you don't say it? And that's...
My husband and I have this thing going on. You've lived with me for 30 years. You still don't know when I'm upset? No?
And it happens more with introverted people because introverted people feel things very intensely, but they don't express it as much. So it's already brewing in our head or in our mind. It's like, I've been upset for half a day already. And then here comes the extroverted person coming in and go like, nah, she looks okay. I'm just going to go get my beer and sit down and watch TV. Because the extroverted person is thinking, oh, I would tell anyone about the least thing that is upsetting me, even though it's just this much. I would tell people, oh, I don't like that. Even though it's like minor, doesn't really bother me much, but I'll tell people about it. And they assume that other people would do that too. So these two things kind of interact. One is saying everybody is like me. The way I do things, I can make that assumption that other people would do it the same way. And then the second one is, this is what I'm thinking or this is what I'm feeling, and other people should know it too. So these two, and then the third one is kind of interesting, understanding the majority. So let me pull up a statistics here. So MBTI frequency, and this is coming from the official website of MBTI, and I'm gonna make it a little bit bigger. Oh, really? It doesn't work because of the I think it's a CSS style sheet thing. Okay, I'm hoping you guys can kind of read this part here. Because there are 16 types, each type should have about around 6% of the entire population. So now you can compare the actual percentage versus the expected percentage, which is about 6%. You can see how ISTJ and ISFJ both are the majority. Because if each type is only supposed to have 6%, ISFJ is more than doubly overrepresented. And ISTJ is almost doubly overrepresented. So if you just walk out onto the street, okay, the chances of finding another ISFJ or another ISTJ is pretty high. Now, if you are one of the unfortunate minorities like INFJ or INTJ, those two are the rarest. Okay, so if you look at INFJ, which is only 1.5%, and INTJ, which are only 2.1%, then those people are very unlikely to find someone of their type. Okay? So guess what defines the norm? Do you think the ISTJs get to say, I think we are going to define the norm here? Nope. They're the outliers. Okay? INFJs, same way, they're the outliers. Now, between ISTJ and ISFJ, even though they change, in terms of the T versus the F, because those two are in the middle of the stack, they're kind of interchangeable sometimes. So you might find, both of you may find that sometimes you're driven by thinking and sometimes you're driven by feeling, because they're in the middle, so they are in a position where, yeah, sometimes I can use this a little bit more, even though it's the third place, but I would use it more than the second place. Okay, so do you feel that that's the case?
Yeah. Yeah. 'Cause even when I was reading the description that you were going over,
Uh-huh.
I felt like some of those are also the way I base decisions.
Yep.
But then I read the other one and it depends on the situation.
Yep.
So yeah.
So ISFJ, ISTJ have a much more balanced thinking versus feeling function. It's not really lopsided like me. Okay, I'm lopsided because thinking is on top and then feeling is all the way down. So it's kind of lopsided. in that sense, it is lopsided. All right. So getting back to so understanding the majority means if you are in the majority, just kind of keep in mind that there are people who are not in the majority. Doesn't mean they are weird or awkward or wrong. It just means that they are different. And they're around and they do certain things, and that's how it's just they're just different. And then people in the minority, especially the really, really rare minority, they also have to understand this, because they have to understand that the majority of the people do not identify with them because they don't really see things, think about things, and feel about things the same way. So don't feel too left out. Just try to express yourself a little bit more, when you're not the majority. Is that making any sense? Okay. What about the other types of conflicts? Well, I versus I actually can cause. It's nice in a way because both can use the space, okay? But at the same time, because when two people are introverted, they can get into conflicts because of lack of communication. Getting back to the first 2 points that I just talked about, the assumption the other person is like you, and the assumption the other person can read your mind, happens a lot more when you have two introverted people. If one is extroverted, then it's going to be a little bit different, because the extroverted person will kind of say more things to try to lead the introverted person to do something, to say something. But when you have two introverted people, then you have that particular issue. Now there's a subcase too. If the dominant function is a judging function, so that refers to anyone with I as the first letter and P as the last letter, that would be me, then actions and decisions may seem to be done without consideration or consultation of others, from the perspective of the other person. So I would certainly do one thing, like I would buy something from Amazon, and it arrives at the door, a few days later. And then my wife would be asking, why did you buy that? What did you buy? Because I didn't consult her. Because in my mind, it's like, okay, I'm thinking this through. Okay, these are the reasons why I'm buying this. I'm going to use it for that. But it's all in my head. To my wife, it's like a box just showed up at the door. Why did you order that? What was that? That's because my judging function is introverted. So I make my decision internally without having to bounce off things, without having to talk to people. If the dominant function is a perceiving function, which refers to IXXJ, so anyone with a introverted letter for the first one and a judging letter for the last one, it may seem to other people their conclusion may be made with limited or incomplete data. Because their perceiving function is introverted, which means it's directed inward, people of this particular category, which include both of you, would quietly observe. Is that kind of describing you? Because if that is not the case, you need to let me know so that I can collect even more data about MBTI and whether it's accurate or not. So introverted perceiving people are quietly observing as opposed to constantly probing. Okay, extroverted perceiving people, would probe all the time. They would keep asking questions. They would say, "What are you feeling about this? How do you like that?" Okay, and they would just kind of probe. But introverted perceiving people would just sit quietly and just let all the information come in. But is that going to be enough information to make decisions? Maybe, maybe not. What if there's not enough information to make a decision? Well, with some people, they will start to fill in the blanks. And when we fill in the blanks, then we are making assumptions. So we are starting to, I'm trying to think of the right word for this. So we are trying to fill in the blanks. We are we're extrapolating from what we can actually observe passively. And sometimes those assumptions may or may not be correct. So we may jump to a conclusion that, well, there's not actually enough data to support it, but it's a possibility. But because people with a J at the end, they like closure. Would that be a fair statement? Okay, because you like closure, so you need to make a decision. You want to classify things one way or another. And in the absence of complete data, then you want to kind of fill in the data so that you can actually get to the conclusion part. Whereas whereas P people, if this is a P, then those people can just leave it undecided. It's like, it's cool either way.
Oh, no, we don't like that.
I can tell you stories about me and my wife walking in the neighborhood. Okay, and I'm just walking and feeling the wind in my hair, the temperature and stuff like that, and she'll be pointing out, that lawn, that's overwatering. That's wasting water. This tree here, I think it can be trimmed a little bit better. Okay, this is not the right way to trim a tree. But that garbage can over there, I think it's too far away from the curb. And I'll just be walking, and I see exactly the same thing. Okay, I'm not blind. Okay, I see exactly the same thing, but I don't think of anything. And in my mind, I'll be thinking about other things like, I wonder how many miles we have walked today. How many calories has it burned? How did this compare to yesterday? So I'll be wondering about things that are not judging. There's no classification whatsoever. It's just like, I can look at a tree that's kind of like lopsided and go like, it is lopsided, and that's it. Okay, it is what it is, and that's about it. But I wouldn't judge it. I would not evaluate it, and make decisions and evaluate. So that's kind of a tendency between P-type people and J-type people. Okay, I versus E. So when you have one introverted person and an extroverted person, it can be exhausting. So the biggest issue with that is exhaustion. Okay, so we can try to see it from both perspectives. From the introverted person's perspective, you are talking to someone who keeps like that. Okay, they keep asking questions, they keep talking about things, and after a while, okay, you might think, I just want to be quiet and have a break. Okay, I can tell you, conversations between me and a good friend of mine who's ENTP. I'm INTP, the other person is ENTP. So we actually think and function in very similar ways, except he's very extroverted and I'm kind of introverted. So he was very eager to talk about things like, oh, Tech, look at this cool tool that I just bought, this week. He runs an auto shop. Yep. No, he is an ENFJ, but he's extroverted too. But he is extroverted as well. Yes. But this mechanic, his ENTP, which is very compatible with me, none of us is very feeling type. So, we don't hurt feelings of each other very easily. It's like, we can be criticizing each other to no end, and it's like, okay, we're just talking about stuff. So there's no hurt feeling whatsoever. But because of the extrovertedness of him, after maybe an hour or two, of conversation, I need a break. Even though everything that he talks about is interesting to me, it's still too much. I just need time by myself to absorb and process all that stuff. But to him, I can be exhausting because I'm just like a little sink here, just taking in information, but there's nothing bouncing back. It's like throwing a ball at the wall, except it doesn't bounce back, right? It's just thud, and then the ball just drops. So to him, it can be exhausting because it's like, come on, give me something back. So that can happen with E and I, but within an organization, I talked about that later, how to resolve these potential conflicts is to have breaks in meetings. So instead of having a 4-hour meeting, with all kinds of people, break it up, maybe like have every 45 minutes, take a 5-minute break. So within the 5-minute break, the extroverted people can kind of do their own things outside, keep talking and keep bouncing off ideas. And then the introverted people can just kind of sit in the room, close their eyes, process what just happened, and then after 5-10 minutes, get back to the meeting, everybody get the energy back. Sensing versus intuition. This is a difference of how information is taken in. Sensing people focus more on the tangible, factual details, as opposed to N people who look at the patterns, differences, ideas, and concepts. So this is a major thing of miscommunication, not to the point of causing interpersonal conflicts, but I don't really see what you're saying, that type of miscommunication. So in a conversation, a sensing person can spew out a lot of details really, really fast. Even the introverted person who's a sensing type can still do that. my wife can tell me what happened in her day, okay, at work in details, like hour by hour, minute by minute, okay? And by the time she's on the fourth sentence, I'm still processing the first. Because what I'm trying to do in my mind is going like, where is this going? What is the concept that she's trying to tell me? What is the idea that she's trying to tell me? And I don't have any clues, so I'm just looking at all the pine needles, trying to reconstruct the tree from pine needles. So it can be exhausting, and sometimes I miss the point because I just cannot follow, all those, details. The opposite way an N person can present, that would be me, presenting things that are relatively abstract, just ideas and concepts and stuff like that, but there's not enough connection between those things. So a sensing person listening to me go like, I don't really see how those things are connected. So I would say one sentence and go like, oh, this is really cool, I found out, blah, 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 blah. They go like, I don't get it. Because those concepts were not sufficiently connected when I presented. So that can happen. So fortunately, Larry and I are both N types, so this type of miscommunication doesn't happen. But because I'm an I type and he's an E type, so we cannot have conversations more than maybe an hour or so. The next one is feeling versus thinking, which is actually very interesting because this one is difficult to resolve. It's based on how we make decisions. Why would you make a decision like that? Okay, because, well, there are 4 ways to make decisions. TI says, I make decisions based on what is true, what makes sense to me. Okay. TE says, I make decisions based on efficiency. Okay, what makes the world a better place? But a better place in this case is not better for the people. It is like more energy efficient. Okay, the air is cleaner. Okay, so they have some kind of objective measurement that they want to achieve. Okay, that's TE. FE says, I make decisions to make people happy, to have harmony, and I want everybody to be content. I don't want anyone to be in pain. I don't want that to happen to anyone. And then FI people say, I make decisions to meet my own internal way of saying, basically to meet my own values. Okay, I think this is right. I think everybody should be treated the same way. Okay, that's my belief. Okay, so we all make decisions based on that kind of stuff. So in general, if you are a feeling person, the decisions and actions of a thinking person can sometimes seem cold, inconsiderate, and without emotion. It's like a robot would do that. Okay, I'm pretty sure some of you or both of you have experiences in your life where you look at the decisions or actions of somebody else and go like, that's pretty cold. Not illegal, not like, doing something that's illegal, that's harming other people, but it's kind of inconsiderate, without consideration of the feelings of other people. I'll tell you this joke. One person that I know is an INTJ, and INTJ have both TE and FI. So TE basically says, he looks at exterior, measurable, objective kind of stuff, okay? And FI means, he has internal values, okay? He doesn't have extroverted feeling, so the feeling and emotion of other people really do not concern him. So when he was a TA, he would walk up to students and go like, I think electrical engineering is not really a good major for you. And he would say it without sugarcoating or anything like that. He would just walk up and say that as a teaching assistant. Okay, so he wasn't even a professor. He wasn't even like a big shot, big name professor at Stanford University, where well, you kind of can see that coming, right? Someone who's a renowned, robotics, expert may walk up to you and go like, "Tech, not really kind of cut out for this kind of work." You can like, yeah, okay, with your expertise, I can buy that. No, he was a TA. That's kind of stuff. At the same time, the action and decisions of a feeling person sometimes can be seen as illogical, or it doesn't make sense to a thinking person. I'll give you one example that will tell you, a potential conflict between these two types. Okay, so here's a person, with burnt brownies on the tray. Okay, feeling a little sad, expressing a little bit sadness about it, and go like, "Oh man, I burnt my brownies." Okay. Walking up to the next person, okay, a friend. So a feeling person, a feeling friend, would drop everything and just hug this person and comfort this person and go like, because they identify with the pain. It doesn't even matter whether it's extroverted feeling or introverted feeling. Extroverted feeling people, such as yourself, would identify with the pain of the other person like right away. I can pick up your pain, I can pick up your sadness. Let me help you fix that, fix the sadness, okay? Introverted feeling, which is a part of you, will basically say, well, what would I feel if that was my, brownies burnt? I would feel kind of suckish, okay? Well, if I would feel that, you must be feeling that as well. So you would project your own reaction to the same situation to the other person. So you're still feeling driven, but you would still give that person a hug. Okay? A thinking person would go look like that and go like, "I see you have a problem. Perhaps your toaster has a non-functional thermostat. I'll help you fix that." And right away, let me go get my tools and bring me to your toaster oven. I'll help you fix it. Now, depending on the person holding the tray, if that person is also a thinking person, and the reaction is, "I'll help you fix the problem. Let's go, fix the thermostat. I know how to do it." I would feel pretty good because you're helping me to fix a problem, and in the future, I won't have burnt, brownies anymore. This is the correct solution. I like it. Not a problem. But if I'm a feeling person, and you bring your tools and go like, "Okay, let's take this thing apart and fix it." I go like, "What about me? I'm still feeling really sad. You don't give me a hug. You don't say I'm feeling sorry." But you can see the thinking person really is trying to help. It's like, "I see you have a problem here. Your toaster oven is not working correctly. I'll help you with fixing it so that in the future you will have perfectly done brownies." But the thinking person is not addressing the feeling of the feeling person right at that moment. And now we have miscommunication because the feeling person will say, "You don't care about me." Well, if I didn't care about you, I would still be gaming on that Nintendo Wii over there. The reason why I dropped everything to help you is because I cared. But the feeling person doesn't think of it that way. Because if you care, you would give me a hug first. And then the thinking person would say, "It doesn't make sense. How would a hug fix your toaster oven?" do you see how that can they go in this direction? They miss each other completely. And then the next type of conflict would be a J versus a P. So that's kind of you guys versus me. A J person would appear close-minded to a P person. It's like, "Come on, there's not enough information to make decisions. Let's keep all the options open." But we have been keeping all the options open for the past 2 years. And a P person can seem aimless, lazy, and indecisive to a J person. I wake up every day, and then my wife asks me, "So, what is your goal of the day?" I go like, "I don't have any goals." I look down my list, I look at all the things that I absolutely have to do, and I'll do 80% of that. And then I would go like, now that I have time, understanding that I have 20% of the stuff that I absolutely have to do not done yet, and I will go like, yeah, I can do it later. Now let's move on to things that I really want to do. Whereas my wife would go down the list and go like, I'll hit every single thing that I need to do before we move on to anything else. So to a J person, a P person can definitely look aimless and quote unquote lazy. So how do we resolve the conflicts? I versus I, it really has to do with expressing, okay? So I need to express the way I think. So I would tell my wife, okay, I'm going to buy this because I think we need it, and so on and so forth. So by making my thinking process, by making the thinking process visible or perceivable to my wife, then she'll go like, oh, okay, I see you have a reason to do it. And she doesn't really check the reason that much. It's just that, oh, okay, I can see that you have thought about it and you have a line of reasoning. Okay, I can see that. And that's what's important. To a J person, IXXJ person, the way to kind of help minimize conflicts is to probe people a little bit more, okay? So in the absence of sufficient information, you go like, well, I don't really know whether that person is not talking to me because that person is really upset about this, or that person really just doesn't have anything to say about it. Let me check. Let me probe that person just a little bit. Are you feeling okay? Yeah, I'm fine. Oh, okay, I see. That person just didn't have anything to say, not really something upset about, not really being upset about something. Or if that person says, you know, that thing that you said about half an hour ago, that was still bugging me. Oh, I didn't know that. Can you tell me more about that? So by probing, you can resolve, okay, which way is it, and you have more information to make a decision. I versus E, we kind of talked about this. We just need like no more than an hour of interaction, and then take a break, and then come back and, you know, resume. N versus S, you know, basically involve the intuition person filling in the gaps a little bit more and present more examples and stuff like that, as opposed to a sensing person can kind of decide whether all the details need to be presented or not. Thinking versus feeling. This is an interesting one. This is a long section here. The reason why this is a long section has to do with, okay, the first part is kind of important. A person with a T personality actually has feelings, and vice versa, okay? So the key to do this is to, okay, let me go to here. Okay, so here is an example. Okay, I'm only picking ESFJ as an example here, but it applies to all feeling types. So in a disagreement, okay, of some kind, argument, disagreement of some kind, a feeling person kind of have to consciously and say, okay, let me not look at the situation from the feeling perspective. Okay, let me force myself to look at the situation from a logical perspective and say, maybe I should not look at it as a criticism or a scrutiny, and I'll just look at it from a logical perspective and see if there's a logical point to what that other person just said. And then the thinking person is going to have to do the same thing. So instead of me looking at something and say, oh, that doesn't make sense, okay, I kind of have to force myself to say, okay, if I look at it from the feeling perspective, from the other person's perspective, how would that person feel about this, you know, situation, or feel about this disagreement? So basically, you have to force yourself to use what doesn't come natural to you, and remember and say, oh, I keep looking at things from this perspective because this is what I usually do. Let me see if I can look at it from a different perspective. Okay, a feeling person will start to use a logical way of looking at things when they say, okay, you're hurting my feeling because you say that I'm not right. But, well, hold on a second here. Let me try to switch to the logical side and say, well, is it actually correct what I said? Okay, let me cast aside the feeling a little bit and look at it from that perspective. Or a thinking person can look at the situation, go like, well, that person is upset about nothing. Okay, that doesn't make sense to me. Okay, instead of looking at it that way and saying it doesn't make sense, well, okay, I know I'm right. Okay, however, maybe that person has a reason to feel hurt. Okay, so let me see if I can find out why that person is feeling hurt. So that's kind of the way to resolve that situation. We are running out of time, so what I'll do is I'm just going to mention the ones that you guys are. So both of you, so this is easy because both of you are SI dominant. There we go. So because you're SI dominant, you are living history books. So comparing yourself to other family members or colleagues, do you think that you maintain the history of a workplace, of your family, of family traditions, of conventions, more so than your colleagues or your family members? Okay. Okay, well, colleagues is kind of a special case because the environment is a little bit more dynamic, and there's less to talk about traditions. What about Rachel?
Yeah.
So you have to kind of compare to your siblings or parents or other family members and say who uphold the standard or the traditions more, you or the rest?
I think my husband and I are equal.
Okay. Yeah, my wife is SI dominant, so she's very big on we need to have some kind of tradition. We need to have some kind of set pattern of doing things, and I'm kind of the opposite. I'm more on a per situation kind of basis. It's like, well, every situation is different. Every Christmas is different. Every New Year Day is different. There's no need to do the same thing every year. So then we separate into the subtype. So ISFJ, they apply traditions, conventions, and down-to-earth actions to improve harmony. So basically, your secondary function is determining how you use your experience, how you use a memory. So with ISFJ, they apply that to improve harmony, like cooking, washing, doing some of the little things to help everybody feel better. Okay, ISTJ, on the other hand, would focus on channel that SI dominant to make things work. Would that kind of describe Rachel? And it has to be something that's tangible, something from the outside that it works. Okay, it cannot be something that's just inside and go like, yeah, I can explain that, cool. No, it has to be something outside and it has to be tangible. Can you give me an example of?
No.
Okay, that's fine.
Well, I would say at work. I mean,
You did oil change over the break.
I did.
Yeah, that's one of those things. It's tangible. It's a very objective kind of thing that you do. Okay, and it's tangible. Is it done or not? And it's very factual. And in your case, it will be the equivalence of I baked cookies or I baked turkey. That sort of stuff is very, very tangible. So the interesting thing is you can compare ISFJ can compare to INTJ, only off by one letter. Still a feeling type, still a judging type. N-type people do not care much about, oh, I'll bake you cookies, or I'll, shop things and decorate things and stuff like that. And people tend to help people feel better in a more kind of abstract way. They will find out what is the problem in your life, and then they will try to help you fix that. But they won't be the ones who will say, oh, let me bake some cookies or brownies, So because they are not as down to earth, so to speak, so they would help people in a more abstract way. So what do you think? We're officially out of time?
That's cool.
It is?
I think it's always interesting to learn. I guess for you to be described from someone you don't even know, or just based on questions that you answer. I think it's really cool.
Now, don't let it define you either. Those MBTI letters, really is not defining you. It is characterizing you. So, so in my case, being an INTP, is not an excuse for me to be a insensitive, as my students say, asshole. One student came to me, after doing the personality test, and he was very, very upset about it, and go like, Jack, I was tested as an INTP, and go like, okay, that's kind of cool. And he said, but I don't want to be an asshole. Well, your MBTI does not define you. It is simply a classification based on how you answer some of the questions, 50-something questions. So it reflects certain things about you, but it doesn't define you either. The second letter is usually not this one, the second function, okay? The second function. So let me point out what function we are talking about here. So for ISFJ, the second function is extroverted feeling. For ISTJ, the second function is extroverted thinking. That is usually known as your growth function. The growth function basically means that is the function. If you nurture that function, you will have growth in your personality. In the case of ISFJ, the extroverted feeling part, if you grow that function, that's what's going to get you outside to talk to people, is because you want to care about people. And in extroverted thinking, that's how you get outside. That's how you go out, go outside of the house and do stuff, because you want to get things done. So that's your growth function, and it's important to nurture your growth function, because otherwise, if you're thinking about SI, then you're reliving experience all the time. Then you're not going out, you're not doing stuff anymore. So you kind of have to grow your second function, which is known as your growth function, to kind of make you more of a well-rounded person. And then your last function is known as your stress function. So I'm going to conclude it with that note. Okay, I'm sorry about scrolling really, really fast here. Okay, so the last function is known as the stress function. So for ISTJ and ISFJ both, your stress function is NE, the unknown basically. Things that are abstract, not determined, unknown, things that are like, I have no idea what's going to happen, okay, is what's going to stress you. That's going to be a stress function. And the way to grow or to help your stress function grow, sometimes you need the help of another person. So another person who has NE as either the dominant or the auxiliary function can help you appreciate, oh, sometimes unknown is not so bad. My wife enjoys going out to hiking trips with me to places that we have not been to, because by herself, she's not going to do it. It's an unknown. I don't know what's going to happen. All kinds of bad things can happen. I don't want to think about it. Okay, but I go like, oh, I'm curious. I want to find out, what this display is about. So when I bring her, she feels like, okay, well, since you feel okay and confident and comfortable about doing this, I'll tag along. But then she will realize, oh, the scenery is great here. I did not expect to see this, when we get up here. And then she will start to grow her NE function a little bit more. She will start to be less fearful of the unknown because she started to go like, oh, sometimes unknown is good. It surprises me. Yep. INTP people are the kind of people who would basically answer the question. This is something I read, it's not original. So a person was in his deathbed and his son asked him and say, well, how do you want your funeral arranged? Okay, Dad. Who wants to do, is there any person you want to kind of, do your eulogy and stuff like that? And then the dad says, well, surprise me. I found that to be very fitting for me. It's like, why would I care? Surprise me. All right, well, that kind of concludes the whole thing because we're out of time. There's actually a lot more material that I have written. It's not done. That's a very INTP thing. Things are never done.
Well, Doc, thank you.
You're welcome.
Interesting. I'm glad I came today.
Yeah, there are a lot of links. If you write down the URL, I know it's kind of long. You can read all the different material.
Oh, okay.
Yep. Or you can take a picture. It's easier to take a picture. Yep.
I always think of that. My students do all the time.
Yes, my students do too, but in some classes, the professors do not allow that.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah, we in the computer science department, we have a few professors who refuse to let students take pictures of the projector or the whiteboard.
Oh, they want them to write it all down.
Yeah. And this is also recorded. So if you guys want to know the URL to YouTube, I can send that to you too.